She thought he had forgotten her name, until the night she was called to his study to collect forgotten papers and saw it written in the margin of every book on his desk, in handwriting so careful it looked like prayer. 3 months earlier, Elara Finch had arrived at the Thornwick estate carrying a single leather case and a letter of reference, so brief it might as well have been blank. The housekeeper had looked her over with the practiced skepticism of someone who had seen 100 girls just like her, young, quiet, unremarkable, and assigned her to the least desirable position in the house. Night inventory clerk, responsible for cataloging the Duke's extensive library after the household slept. It was lonely work, but Elara preferred it that way. Loneliness meant invisibility, and invisibility meant safety. Duke Adrian Thornwick was not what she expected. The rumors painted him as cold, scholarly, obsessed with ancient texts and modern philosophy to the exclusion of all human connection. But when she glimpsed him during her first week, always at a distance, always surrounded by advisors or buried in correspondence, what struck her was not coldness, but exhaustion. The kind that came from carrying too much for too long. Their first real encounter happened by accident. She had been reshelving a collection of astronomy texts near midnight when a voice behind her said, "That one's misfiled." Elara turned sharply. The Duke stood in the doorway, still dressed formally despite the late hour, his expression unreadable. "My lord," she said, dropping into a curtsy. "I apologize. I'll correct it immediately. The Sheen catalog belongs in the Eastern Wing. It's referenced in the navigation text there." He paused. "You read Latin?" She hesitated. Admitting education beyond her station was dangerous, but lying felt worse. "Yes, my lord." Something shifted in his face, not quite surprise, but attention. "And Greek?" "Some." "French?" "German?" "Both." For a long moment, he simply looked at her. Then, "What's your name?" "Elara Finch, my lord." He repeated it once, softly, as if committing it to memory. Then he left without another word. She told herself it meant nothing. But after that night, he began appearing in the library more frequently. Never intrusively. He would work at his desk while she cataloged, the scratch of his pen the only sound between them. Sometimes he would ask her opinion on a passage he was translating. Sometimes he would simply leave books open to pages he thought might interest her. They never spoke of anything personal. Yet somehow, in that shared silence, something shifted. One evening, she found a first edition of a poetry collection she'd once mentioned loving as a child. It sat on her workspace with no note, no explanation. When she glanced toward his desk, he didn't look up from his writing, but she saw the smallest tightening at the corner of his mouth. Almost a smile. Elara's heart did something dangerous then, something she'd sworn she would never allow. It recognized him. The household, of course, noticed nothing. To them, she remained what she'd always been. A shadow, a function, a girl whose name no one bothered to remember. Even the Duke, in public, maintained perfect formality. He never acknowledged her in corridors, never sought her out during daylight hours. She told herself that was proof enough. Whatever existed between them in the library's midnight quiet was not real, could not be real. Then came the evening that shattered everything. A foreign scholar arrived at Thornwick, a woman of impeccable credentials and devastating beauty, who spoke 7 languages and debated philosophy with the Duke as though they were equals. Elara watched from the shadows during a formal dinner, saw the way the woman made him laugh, saw the way his attention focused with an intensity she'd never witnessed before. The scholar stayed for 3 weeks, and during those 3 weeks, the Duke stopped coming to the library at night. Elara told herself it didn't matter, told herself she'd been foolish to imagine anything beyond professional courtesy. She continued her work with mechanical precision, cataloging, reshelving, existing in the spaces between notice and forgetting. On the scholar's final evening, there was a grand dinner. Elara was not invited, of course, but she heard the laughter echoing through the halls, heard the music, heard the sounds of a world she would never be part of. When the house finally fell silent near midnight, she returned to the library for her usual work, and that's when the housekeeper found her, breathless and irritated. "The Duke needs last quarter's acquisition records. Immediately." "They're in his study." Elara's heart stuttered. "His private study? Do you see anyone else here to fetch them?" "Go. Now." The study door was unlocked. She entered carefully, as though stepping onto sacred ground. The room smelled of leather and ink and something else, bergamot. she realized. His scent. She found the records quickly. Should have left immediately. But her eyes caught on the books scattered across his desk. Philosophy, poetry, history, all bristling with paper markers, margins dense with notes. And there, written in the careful script she'd come to recognize, filling every available space, Alara, her name, everywhere. Alara's hands trembled as she lifted the first book, a treatise on Kantian ethics. The margins were filled with his handwriting, that distinctive careful script. But between the philosophical notations, again and again, her name appeared. Alara would disagree with this premise. Ask Alara about the translation here. Alara said something similar Tuesday. She set it down carefully and picked up another. Poetry this time, Neruda. More notes, more references. On one page, beside a verse about longing, he'd written simply, her favorite color is amber. Like the reading lamp she prefers in the eastern corner. The book slipped from her fingers. How long had he been doing this? How many conversations had he been continuing in her absence? Across pages she was never meant to see. You weren't supposed to find those. She spun around. The Duke stood in the doorway, still dressed for the evening's entertainment, his expression unreadable in the low light. My lord, she couldn't finish. Couldn't explain. Couldn't breathe. He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. The housekeeper sent you. Yes. The acquisition records. She held them up like a shield. I should go. Alara. Her name from his lips stopped her completely. Not Miss Finch. Not the clerk. Just her name, spoken like something precious. I owe you an explanation, he said quietly. You owe me nothing, my lord. Don't. The word came sharp. Don't reduce this to station. Not here. Not now. She stared at him, heart hammering. Then what is this? He moved to the desk, picking up one of the books she'd been examining. Do you know why I stopped coming to the library? The scholar, he interrupted, was invited here by my advisors. A suitable match, they said. Accomplished. Appropriate. He set the book down with deliberate care. And utterly wrong. Alara's breath caught. I spent 3 weeks trying to feel something that made sense, he continued. Something that fit the world's expectations. And every evening, while she spoke brilliantly about philosophy I should have found fascinating, all I could think about was whether you'd found the astronomy text I left for you. Whether you'd understood what I was trying to say. What were you trying to say? He looked at her then, fully, with an intensity that made her feel seen in a way she'd never experienced. That someone finally sees me. Not the title. Not the expectations. Me. She should have stepped back. Should have maintained distance. Instead, she moved closer. I'm nobody, my lord. A clerk who catalogs your books. You're the woman who corrected my translation of Horace without flinching. Who leaves marginalia in Greek because you know I'll find it. Who reorganized the entire philosophy section by argumentative structure instead of chronology because you understood what I actually needed. His voice dropped. You're the reason I started believing my library could feel less like a mausoleum and more like a home. Tears burned behind her eyes. The world won't understand. I don't care. Your advisors will adapt. Society, Alara. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the longing. I have spent my entire life doing what was expected, marrying whom I should, maintaining appearances. And his voice cracked slightly. I was desperately unhappy. Then you arrived, and suddenly midnight became the only hour worth living for. You never said anything. In public, you don't even acknowledge me. Pain flashed across his face. I was trying to protect you. Gossip is cruelest to those who can't defend themselves. I thought if I maintained distance during the day, perhaps the rumors wouldn't start. He gestured helplessly at the books. Instead, I wrote your name on everything I touched, like a fool. She let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. Like a fool, she repeated softly. Yes. Silence settled between them, but it was different now, charged with everything they'd been too afraid to name. The scholar left. Tonight, he said finally, I told my advisors there would be no engagement, that my decision was final. What did they say? That I'm being irrational, that I'm risking the estate's reputation. He paused. That I've clearly lost perspective. Perhaps you have. No. He moved closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. For the first time in 10 years, I finally have perspective. I see exactly what matters. And what's that? You. Here. Real. He reached out slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, and took her hand. His touch was warm, careful, reverent. I know what I'm asking is impossible. I know every rule of society stands between us. But I'm asking anyway. Asking what? Stay? Not as a clerk. Not as someone who exists only in shadows. His thumb traced across her knuckles. Stay as the woman I want to build a life with. The world seemed to narrow to just this. His hand holding hers, his eyes searching her face, the terrifying, beautiful impossibility of what he was offering. They'll destroy you for this, she whispered. Let them try. Adrian. His name escaped before she could stop it. Not my lord. Not your grace. His expression transformed. Say it again. Adrian. He closed his eyes briefly, as though studying himself. When he opened them, the Duke of Thornwick was gone. What remained was just a man who'd been lonely too long. I need you to understand something, he said carefully. If you stay, I will make this permanent. I will marry you, and the world will have opinions. Marry? The word hung between them. Too large, too impossible. Yes. No hesitation. Did you think I would ask for less? Alara's world tilted. Marriage. Not companionship hidden in shadows. Not some quiet arrangement tucked away from society's gaze. Marriage. The full force of his name, his protection, his life, offered to her as though she were the one conferring the honor. Adrian. She pulled her hand back gently, needing distance to think. You can't mean this. I have never meant anything more. She turned away, pressing her palms against the desk where her name still covered every page. Do you know what they'll call me? What they'll say? Yes. Do you know what they'll call you? I don't care. She spun back to face him. You should. You have responsibilities. The estate, the tenants who depend on you, the legacy you're meant to preserve, all of which will survive my marrying someone I actually love. The word stopped her cold. Love, she repeated, testing its weight. Yes. He moved closer again, but didn't touch her. Just stood there, open, vulnerable in a way she suspected he rarely allowed himself to be. I love you. I love the way your mind works, the way you see patterns in chaos, the way you're kind to servants others ignore. I love that you correct my Latin without apology and leave me notes and margins you know I'll find. His voice softened. I love that when you laugh, which isn't nearly often enough, you always look surprised by your own joy. Tears slipped down her cheeks before she could stop them. But more than that, he continued, I love who I am when I'm with you. Not the dupe performing his role, just myself. And I haven't been able to say that in longer than I care to admit. Alara wiped at her face roughly. This is insane. Probably. Your advisors will fight you. Let them. Society will make our lives difficult. They'll try. She looked at him, really looked, and saw not naivety but determination. He understood the cost. Was choosing to pay it anyway. Why? She asked. Why me? You could have anyone. I don't want anyone. The words came fierce, immediate. I want the woman who reorganized my library at midnight because she couldn't stand inefficiency, who reads philosophy for pleasure and debates Kant like he's in the room arguing back, who sees me as a person worth knowing instead of a title worth acquiring. He paused. I want you. Specifically. Impossibly. Completely. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Every rational thought screamed this was dangerous, foolish, destined for disaster. But beneath that, something else whispered. What if it isn't? I'm frightened, she admitted. So am I. What if we fail? What if we don't? The question hung between them, fragile and fierce. Alara thought about the past 3 months. The careful distance, the midnight conversations, the way her name looked in his handwriting, written and rewritten like he was teaching himself a new language. The language of allowing himself to want something beyond duty. She thought about returning to invisibility, about walking away from the first person who'd ever made her feel seen. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. If I stay, she said slowly, I'm not going to hide. I won't be your secret. I would never ask you to be. And when people are cruel, and they will be, you can't protect me from all of it. No, but I'll stand beside you through it. She searched his face, looking for doubt, for hesitation. Found only steady certainty. I don't know how to be a duchess. The smallest smile touched his lips. I don't particularly know how to be a happy duke. We'll learn together. Something in her chest loosened finally. Not all the fear, but enough. Ask me properly, she said. His expression transformed. surprise giving way to something radiant. He took her hand again, but this time dropped to one knee, there among the scattered books, and her name written everywhere. Alara Finch, he said, voice rough with emotion. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? Of letting me spend the rest of my life proving that choosing you was the sanest decision I've ever made? She laughed then, that surprised, joyful sound you loved. Yes. You absolutely ridiculous man, yes. He stood and pulled her into an embrace that felt like the first honest thing that had happened in Thornwick's halls in years. She buried her face against his shoulder and felt his arms tighten around her, protective and gentle all at once. Thank you, he whispered against her hair. For what? For being brave enough for both of us. She pulled back just enough to look at him. I'm still terrified. Good. That makes two of us. He smiled. But we'll be terrified together. The wedding took place 6 weeks later, small and private, with only the household staff and a handful of Adrian's true friends in attendance. Society reacted exactly as predicted, with scandalized whispers and dramatic pronouncements about fallen standards. The Duke of Thornwick responded by bringing his new Duchess to every public engagement, introducing her with obvious pride, and quietly supporting her when the gossip became particularly vicious. Slowly, something unexpected happened. People began actually meeting Alara instead of judging her from distance. They discovered she spoke 5 languages fluently, that she'd reorganized the estate's archives into something scholars now requested access to, that she remembered names and details about everyone she met, making even the most dismissive nobles feel unexpectedly seen. Within a year, the scandal faded into something else. A story about the scholarly duke who'd found an equally brilliant partner, and the unexpected marriage that had somehow worked. But Alara's favorite moments remained the quiet ones. Late nights in the library, working side by side. Adrian's habit of leaving her notes and books he thought she'd enjoy. The way he still wrote her name in margins sometimes, like a reminder that this, her, them, this impossible real thing, was worth remembering. One evening, nearly 2 years after that midnight discovery, she found him at his desk surrounded by papers. Writing your memoirs? She teased. He looked up with that soft smile reserved only for her. Just correspondence. Though I was thinking. He held up his current letter, where her name appeared in the margin beside a crossed-out sentence. Still doing that? She asked fondly. Old habits. He set down his pen and pulled her onto his lap, ignoring her laughing protest. Besides, it reminds me. Of what? That the best things in life are the ones you're brave enough to write down, to make real, to choose even when they're impossible. He kissed her temple gently. Like you. Alara leaned into him, surrounded by books and lamplight and the man who'd seen her when she was trying to be invisible. I love you, she said simply. I know. He tightened his arms around her. You tell me every day. I never say it. Yes, you do. Just not with words. He gestured around the library. Her library now, too. You reorganize my chaos. You leave me notes. You chose to stay when leaving would have been easier. His voice softened. You write your love in everything you touch. I learned that from you. Outside, evening rain began to fall against the tall windows. Inside, the Duke and Duchess of Thornwick sat together in comfortable silence, surrounded by books filled with marginalia and truth, and each other's names. Written carefully, like prayer, like promise, like the beginning of something impossible that had somehow become their life.